Hello there. Actually, the date of Rishi Sunak should bring mainly positive headlines. The Prime Minister of Great Britain visited a soup kitchen in London on Friday and helped distribute food to the needy. Of course, cameras were there to broadcast the Prime Minister's good deeds around the world just before Christmas. But what finally spread were recordings of Sunak, which made the multi-millionaire seem enraptured instead of close to the people. Yeah, really. A video clip by Sunak showing the British Prime Minister talking to a person in need circulated on Twitter. Sunak first asked what the man wanted to eat. After introducing themselves and exchanging pleasantries, Sunak asked the man if he worked in business. The man replied, of course, "No, I'm homeless." But Rishi Sunak wasn't discouraged by the answer and followed up. He asked the man if economy was something he would like to gain a foothold in. The man replied that he was interested in the financial industry. Sunak seemed pleased about this and said, "You know, I once worked in the financial industry." He was aware of that, said the homeless man to the British Prime Minister, who has accumulated private assets of almost 1 billion euros in the financial sector, and thanks to his marriage, and who, now is considered the richest member of the British House of Commons. Sunak, in turn, added to a brief explanation that there are many worthwhile jobs in the financial industry, not just in London, but throughout the United Kingdom. Boris Johnson's successor then asked the homeless person, "Would that be something you imagine?" The man replied, "I don't know. I'd like to get through Christmas first." Sunak asked the homeless man about his plans for the holiday season, and he said he hoped to get a place in a collective shelter. The video clip of Rishi Sunak and the homeless man sparked heavy criticism in the UK. British media called the Prime Minister's appearance embarrassing. The deputy leader of the main opposition Labour Party, Angela Rayner, tweeted that the exchange was intolerable. With Rishi Sunak, the third Prime Minister in just 1 year, a much more rational person usually is now at the helm of the government. However, he also has no solutions for the current economic and political problems that are piling up after Brexit. I'll just give you one example. Since mid-December, the island has been experiencing the largest wave of strikes since the 1980s, as you heard on my videos as well. Rail workers, postmen, and even nurses and emergency services workers are protesting a government that has pushed the country into a recession that is essentially homegrown. Sunak has been caught between all stools since he took over Downing Street at the end of October. Markets plummeted after Truss announced £45 billion tax cuts, primarily for higher earners, without even remotely funding it. And so Sunak had no choice but to announce a 180-degree turnaround immediately after taking office. And instead of tax breaks, he is now planning tax increases and an additional austerity package of more than 55 billion, which will primarily affect public services. A policy that is more similar to the austerity policy of David Cameron and for which the Tories basically have no mandate. The last actually elected Prime Minister of the Conservative Tories, Boris Johnson, was there in 2019 with a promise to give the impoverished North a financial boost. But Sunak doesn't even mention that anymore. But he has no choice either. The markets have been so unsettled since the Truss adventure that his scope for fulfilling the promises of the predecessor is extremely limited. With his course, however, he has several problems at once. For one, his fiscal policy shift is making the Tory right nervous, who are categorically opposed to higher taxes to consolidate public finances. This further weakens Sunak's already precarious position within the party. On the other hand, there is nothing left on the island that can be reduced. Public services and the national health system have been so severely slashed for years that any further financial cuts in the midst of a massive inflation endanger them to their core. And the current strikes make that more than clear. Sunak's current attempt to bring the unions to their knees is unlikely to be sustained if the industrial dispute escalates further. After various abrupt course changes in the past few weeks, another U-turn is imminent, which is unlikely to strengthen Sunak politically. And then there is Brexit. The Independent Institute for Tax Estimates, the OBR, recently calculated that leaving the EU is already costing the British economy 4% of its gross national product or gross domestic product, and the trend is rising. So there can be no question of a Brexit dividend. In the short and medium term, a constructive approach to the EU would be the quickest way to at least partially mitigate the damage that Brexit has done to the British economy. Here too, the Prime Minister finds himself still in the stranglehold of his party, for which any rapprochement with the EU, no matter how small, remains a mortal sin. In addition, Conservative poll numbers have not really recovered since Sunak took office. If new elections were held now, the Tories would be all but wiped out in most parts of the country. That also weakens Sunak's ability to discipline the party. 13 Tory MPs have already announced that they will resign before the next election, and many others have resigned and are already looking for new jobs. When in doubt, they can vote in Parliament as they wish, faction pressure or not. Sunak could hold out until the next elections, mainly because no one in his party wants to be wiped off the scene right now. However, if the British perma-crisis escalates further next year, that cannot be ruled out either. Compared to the muddled situation in Downing Street, the change of power in the palace only a few hundred meters away was comparatively gentle and successful. Even Harry and Meghan's Netflix antics haven't significantly shaken popular support for the new King Charles III. His coronation in May is likely to be one of the few moments next year when Britain will have another reason to celebrate, and they should use it, because otherwise the island will continue to face difficult times. And to come back at the homeless situation there, with a prime minister that has no clue of normal people's lives, that is another burden on the whole situation. Something like in the Tories and the members of government are somewhere floating in some palace in the sky and completely detached from the population, and which has a little bit to do with the system that all these Etonians and millionaires only get into Parliament and then in government. They don't really know what the real people are going through, the normal people in their country are going through. And that will remain a problem. And Brexit will stay a problem. And I'll see you in my next video. I'll be back.